Thank you for tuning in to the Natty News Daily podcast. This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Core Nutritionals. You can check out corenutritionals.com for all your supplement needs and use code Natty News Daily at checkout to save 20%. Enjoy the episode.
What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. Now, the three of us, we're busy gentlemen, but because there's thousands of you that watch this every week, tens of thousands,
you bet,
potentially.
Millions.
Don't look at the views. We are facing some scheduling challenges with the three of us, but we've committed to this podcast game. So I don't know who you're going to see on each episode moving forward. Could be any combination of the three of us, or it could be one of us with a guest, or it could be all guests and we're not even present. I don't know what's going to happen, but I assure you,
interesting. Flip the podcast around. Yeah. The B team.
Yeah, we'll just call in random competitors just to run an episode. But we want to make sure we get a podcast up every week. I think that's kind of like a non-negotiable for us. But who does the podcast will be a mystery for everybody. So tonight, as you can see, it's James and I, and by the subject matter of the title, thumbnail of the video, you guys know kind of what we're going to talk about, and that is like what gets people out of bodybuilding, right? I think we've talked extensively between us and with guests about what's gotten us into the sport, but undoubtedly, as people come in, people do come out, and I think especially for me, there's been periods throughout my career where I've potentially thought about exiting the competitive realm, at least, not necessarily the pursuit of being jacked and strong and healthy, but maybe the extremes that come with competing. That's kind of dipped in and out of my competitive career for some reason or another, but it pulls me back in, James. It just
you go to one show, you smell the tan, and you're like, damn it, I'm back.
Damn it. I make one meal of chicken and rice and I'm like, all right, let's go again. Speaking of, look at that.
This episode brought to you by chicken and rice.
Brought to you by chicken and rice, a staple.
No barbecue sauce today, though. Drop the carbs from the barbecue sauce. I went with a raspberry vinaigrette.
Ooh,
fancy over here.
There we go. We don't mess around. Okay, so I just jotted some notes down, and I think this is just going to be a conversation between James and I, and we're just going to kind of see where it goes. So, James, when you think of what would be the main factor that would drive you potentially out of bodybuilding, specifically?
Yeah. I don't think it has to do with like the normal factors a lot of people think of, like not placing well enough, or I know like we've talked off air, like the expectation side of things, because I come into it with, I think, more realistic expectations, knowing running this page and seeing the number of like immense and incredible athletes, right? Like I just like to compete.
Yeah.
For me, I think it would be, I would never let it come to this, right? But I think most individuals that fail in the sport, fail meaning like just leave it entirely, are those that go 100% into it. I think what has saved me, and maybe you are arguably in this last off season, was having other interests, having other hobbies.
Yeah.
And that might not even, like for me, like I've got 100 different things, right? I go hunting and fishing and hiking and, all these other things. But even within the fitness realm, one of my off seasons, I picked up and played rugby competitively, for 2 years. And then when I'm not doing that, like we'll dabble with strength sports. A lot of people will.
Yeah.
Strongman. Sure. And I think honestly, that might be what I do next, is strongman. Yeah. I just have this urge to like pick up heavy rocks. Right. But just not like always having your toe kind of like into something else, not going full-fledged, like head first, 100%. There's some people that can do it, right? Like AJ jumps right to mind, right? Like dude's 100% bodybuilding all day, every day, and has been for decades, almost, seems like.
Decades.
Right? Yeah. He's way older than he seems.
Yeah.
No, but it's just like, some people can do that. I can't. I have to have other things, mainly because like my ceiling in bodybuilding is probably relatively low, right? So I'm going to hit that sooner than some people.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. And that's, someone asked me on like a Q&A, and it was yesterday, that was like, what's the one thing you've learned from Cliff? And it's that like a lot of the competitors that stay the longest, which is typically a metric for success, is how long you can really stick this out, right? Natural bodybuilding is typically a long game. For most people, they're not going to smash it out of the park within the first couple of years unless they have the genetic lottery, right? Most people that are going to see some sort of like success with a placing or a physique development standpoint, it's going to take that 10, 15, 20-year journey, right? So for a lot of us starting, in our late teens, early 20s, like, 30, 35, 40, before you really start, milking your physique for what it possibly could be. And, the ability to stay somewhat trajecting forward with those little off track things, you know what I mean? Like you mentioned the things you've dabbled into. I've done powerlifting now a couple times during off seasons. I do play rec baseball for a couple months through the summer now for the last couple of years. So it keeps me, like you said, like not getting overwhelmed by bodybuilding to the point where it's like all consuming more than necessary, you know what I mean? And that's something that for me, I same as you, I need that separation to some degree. So I can on prep go all in, but off prep, like pull myself back a little bit and just get like reset a little bit and not just bombarded by it 24/7, 365.
Yeah. I think it comes down to like, and I know, especially not to like demean you in any way. I know, especially like if I didn't have bodybuilding, I would be completely fine. I have so many other things, academically trained in physical therapy and, all these other things where I feel like if it's something that you have to do because your entire life is that, it's like, well, what happens if it's taken away, or what happens if I don't reach those goals? And it almost like, you perceive it as a threat almost, right? Where like I get to do this because I know that I could go do something else, right? Like I'm not forced into this because of necessity for my career.
Yep. Yeah, that's where it gets tricky with coaching, right? Is that, I think there's definitely an element where you see business growth on prep, right? Like, we've all seen it. Any competitor sees it, whether it's like posting the shredded photos or the videos and this and that. Like you see the metrics of social media respond, and typically that turns into business because you're getting more inquiries and people are watching you a little bit closer and stuff like that. And I think until you get to that really set point where you're established as a coach, it can feel, like you said, like almost like threatening, where if I don't do this, like, is my business going to die? Am I not going to be able to pay for life if I don't pursue bodybuilding? And, I've had those moments where when I have kind of dabbled in other things, almost afraid to post it and talk about it and share it, because you have that concern of like, oh, is the audience going to be like, oh, Leroy's not bodybuilding anymore, so he can't coach me the same, or he doesn't have the same love for it anymore, so how is he going to put the same passion in? Which can be very intimidating, right? When it's, again, like your livelihood, you know what I mean? But I think me 3 or 4 years ago as a coach would be a lot more scared to do that. Now I think, again, I've established myself that, okay, if I'm not competing this year, next year, 5 years, I'm still going to be capable of having a solid income and business from it. But I can totally relate to the person that's like, man, if I don't do this competitively, or if I'm not in reasonable shape, am I going to lose clients? Am I going to lose business? And that's scary, right? It is. It's scary when it's all connected in some form.
Yeah. To that point, though, what I have found and what I've heard from a lot of other sources too, and just seen anecdotally with like interactions on my posts, people really do like to see the personal side of things, the things outside, to see that you are multifaceted. Because I think it's because the coaching industry is so saturated, right? So like everyone has a personalized program for you, and everyone can get you to lose 30 pounds in however many weeks, right? But it's like people pay for the coach sometimes not because of the knowledge, sometimes not because of, all these accolades. It's just because they appreciate who you are and the vibe that you get off and the personality that you have, right? Because you have to have such a good relationship with your coach. So yeah, I think showing that is honestly better. I get a lot of feedback, like I show the daughters or us like going out and doing things or all those little things just to show that like I'm a person too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think it can be less intimidating for a lot of people, because I think most people look into what they see on social media for like what a bodybuilder should be. And it's this monotonous robot 24/7, 365. And you see the small minority that represent that, but the vast majority, and I think you can probably attest to this because you are also a coach and you're in the space like I am, the vast majority are not like that, right? Especially like in the off season, right? Like we're talking in normal life. On prep, we all get quite robotic, and even to a higher degree as the show gets closer. But during the off season, like all my clients, they're like, "Hey man, like, is it okay if I go for dinner?" I'm like, "Yeah, like go for dinner." Or my girlfriend and I want to go to the movies. Like, should I get popcorn or not? I'm like, dude, go get popcorn. And I think when you, like you said, post your real life and humanize yourself a little bit, you are more relatable to 99.9% of your clients. And that 1% that can be a robot, you can still relate to them and be like, "Hey man, like you're killing it per usual. All T's are crossed, I's are dotted. Respect." But the other 99% of your clients are going to be like, okay, like if Leroy is accomplishing X or James is accomplishing X and still living like a normal dude with a wife and kids and a job and hobbies and hunting and up at 4 a.m. and his, Aura Ring said he should have slept longer, but he's not freaking out. Like that, I think is probably, now that we're talking about it out loud, it's probably so much more valuable than like sheltering yourself and trying to portray, I am bodybuilder, I have no feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just not the look that most people want to go for, whether or not they realize it, right? Like those things are flashy. Those things probably get more likes in general.
Yeah.
But it comes down to like what actually converts, right?
Yeah.
And people are going to have more authentic conversations and a more authentic relationship with someone that actually shows detail. But we're certainly on a tangent now, though. We got into like why people quit bodybuilding. Now we're talking social media strategies. It's all over.
Marketing with Natty News Daily at your service. Yeah. Okay, let's back up a little bit then and talk about expectations and why those can ruin people and kick them out of bodybuilding. I posted about this the other day about like if you only have winning as your metric for like success, not only in bodybuilding but in things in general, but bodybuilding because it is very subjective and most of the things that determine your success are out of your control. As far as like your skeletal frame, judging criteria, this and that, who shows up, who doesn't show up, how many competitors are there, like those are all larger determining factors of how well you will do than the things you can control as far as like sticking to your diet and doing your cardio. And it's a tough pill to swallow for people because it's weird because you are told that the work you put in will net you the result you want, and that has a big asterisk beside it. And that's really tough to get across to people because it can be discouraging where you're like, okay, client, and they're like, all right, Leroy, I'm going to do everything you tell me to do. I'm going to miss no meals. I'm going to nail my training, nail my cardio. Everything's going to be followed. And I'm going to have to be like, but the likelihood of you winning, man, is not good. Yeah. Which is tough, right? And those are conversations with clients that it's hard to navigate through when you have those clients that are so gung-ho on winning. And I find it even more so with newer people that jump into the sport that don't have the exposure to what's out there. You know what I mean? And like you touched on it earlier with like, your potential ceiling and then what you see on Natty News, you're like, oh shit, like this talent pool is very big. And I find with newer competitors that are like, okay, I'm going to give this my all. And like, I really want to win. And do you think I could get an overall and this and that? And it's like, okay, slow down. Like you have no clue what you're up against. And even as people climb the ranks, with clients here anyways in Canada where they do a regional and maybe they place, maybe they win the overall. And they're like, all right, we're going to go to nationals. I'm like, okay, You are now jumping in the deep end because you are facing every overall winner across the country. You are facing all the top threes across the country. And you might be the one that wins, but let's also kind of open our eyes a little bit to what is going to happen here and what might not happen and how we're going to respond to that, because that's where the rails really start to fall off, is when that expectation isn't met. Then oof, it's a rough one.
It's funny that we're talking about this, because I literally, on my drive home from work half an hour ago, was listening to Lawrence Greaves and Eric Helms on the General Muscle podcast talk about this exact thing, right? I think the exact, or the paraphrase quote from Eric was specific to him, but I think generalizable across, the large population of people, was you should only really allow yourself to have the expectation of winning when you're mature enough to handle not winning.
Yep.
Right. So like, yeah, those young individuals, I'm going to go in and win. And then when they don't, it like just derails them and destroys them, versus someone like Eric, who's competed for actually close to 2 decades.
Yep.
Where it's like, I really want to win, but if I don't, it's okay. I'm coming back. Right. Like that kind of mindset. And I think it's hard for people in this sport, because most competitors, at least most that I know, are probably coming from a team sport background, probably at a high level, right? Like my history, collegiate sports or university, if you're outside of the US, right? Which means that you were probably one of the best athletes at your high school. Yep. Probably, were decent at sports to make it to the university level. So you're always used to having some version of success. And then now you're entering this new sport, which is entirely different, right? And it's a whole different criteria. And for people that have been winners their entire life, it's tough to step in and not, right? Yep. And then know that like you can't blame it on anyone else in this sport. It wasn't like your teammate that let in the goal, or this person messed up and took a penalty. It's you. You didn't do something right, or you just don't have the capacity to beat certain people. And that's a very big challenge for some people to handle, where I'll use myself as an example again, right? Like I wasn't the best athlete. I worked my butt off to finally get a starting position in university, but I was like 3rd string, 4th string there for a while, right? Yep. So I worked for it, I earned it, and I cherished it. And I think probably the same thing's going to happen with bodybuilding, right? Like I have not won a show. I have not won an overall. Eventually one day I would like to. When I do, I'll probably appreciate it more, because I had to work so hard for it. And it wasn't something that just like my expectation is I'll win and therefore I win.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think too, just to add fuel to the fire, is how much like with social media now, you get that praise and that encouragement to like the nth degree from like friends and family and people in your circle. And I've had clients where they have a good group of people around them, and when they are getting results that they've never gotten before, they're losing weight or whatever it may be, they're starting to see, for the guys, like they're seeing abs for the first time. For the girls, they're seeing that little pop of shoulders, and they are getting flooded with positive feedback. It's like, I look back on their page 10 posts ago and they got like 17 likes and like a comment. Now it's 50 comments, 200 likes. Like that is dangerous. That's like a drug. And you start to believe the hype. And again, a lot of these people, especially when we're talking first timers, they don't have that exposure. So when Sally is down 15 pounds for her first bikini competition, and all her girlfriends are like, oh my God, you look amazing. And her family's like, wow, like she's never looked like this before. And Sally's like, shit, I do look good. I'm going to go win this. And all the comments, you got this, girl. You're going to go kick ass. You're going to go win. Fire emoji, trophy emoji. That then creates this narrative that like, I am going to win. I am great. Everybody sees the amazing athlete that I am, but they've never seen another athlete before.
Yeah, it's an echo chamber, right? Like, your mom doesn't know what the top natural bodybuilder in the world looks like, right? Like, if I show my brothers or friends outside of bodybuilding how I look right now, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like you look great." I show it to you, and you're like, "Lose 30 pounds."
Yeah, they're like, James, you're shredded. You're like, buddy.
Like I got my butt wiggles,
Yeah,
like, not good enough.
Not good. You won't catch me jumping in this fucking Speedo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is probably the most like dangerous thing for like the current climate with social media and stuff, because back in the day I could imagine that, you get one or two guys at the gym, they're like, dude, you look great, and you just kind of move on with your day. And now it's hundreds, thousands, you know what I mean? Like my following is not massive by no means, and I see on my end what I get when I prep. Like I couldn't imagine like some of these guys with like 50,000 followers, that level of engagement and support, which is great. And it's not like we are not thankful and grateful when that support comes in, because it a lot of the times it's the fire that keeps you going in those dog end times of prep, because you've got people that truly support you and believe in you. But knowing the context of that support and what it actually means versus what it may sound like in your head is super important to figure out, and it's probably next to impossible for a first timer.
Well, there's a difference in that surface level of support that social media gets. Like if you have a big following, or if you've bought followers, right? Like, and everyone can tell who has, because all the comments are like 2 emojis and that's it. And there's 30,000 of them, right? That support is just self-validation, right? Like you want to see those comments to make yourself feel good, to confirm that what you're doing is good. Versus like if I reach out to you, if I reach out to Dan, if I reach out to someone like Berto or Eric, or people that I have these relationships with, and I'm like, honest, am I in shape? And they're like, no. And it's like, okay, that is so much more important. Or like when someone like you're like, all right, hey, no, you're good, you're ready, like let's do it. Okay, like that means tenfold more important than this random person from across the world that I've never met and is a fan. So obviously they're going to show support, right?
Yep. And then the flip side. So we talked about how that build up, right? It's almost like jet fuel building up to the show. The support, the encouragement, the changes you're undergoing. You're seeing, veins you've never seen before, and shape and conditioning you've never seen before. Show day happens, is this massive celebration. You don't place where you want to place, which is crazy, because someone can come second and completely devalue what they've done for the last 20, 25, 30 weeks. But then the other side of it, it's over. The cheers are gone. All the clapping, the fire emojis dissipate. Not only that, now you're starting to look worse. Whew. That's heavy.
It's a dangerous place to be. It is, especially if you don't have a solid group, or you don't have a coach that you can talk to, or if you are a first-time competitor, you don't have that community maybe. So and you can't reach out to the people that aren't in the bodybuilding world, because they don't understand it, right? It is a very different place to be when you want to stop eating but can't stop eating, when you're you feel fat and immense but you're leaner than 95% of the average population. It's a total mind fuck, right? But only a select few people can understand it.
I think that period of time is probably what kills the most careers, because people aren't prepared for what that does to you mentally. And I see it every year with clients, man. Like I undoubtedly, and I think any coach can attest to this, that there's going to be people that you work with through prep, and you can tell by the way they're talking about it. They talk about winning a lot. They talk about placing a lot. Then you start to hear conversations about food focus and can't wait to have this after the show and this and that. And I'm like, like this plane is going down quick, because when you your best case scenario is they are capable of winning, and they do win, and then things go off the rails. But when they want to win and don't, and that emotional distress starts to come in with the lack of support from the outside world, because they don't get it, and it just goes south, man. And it's hard to rescue people from that. And a lot of times it's a long journey of sorting things out physically and mentally after a show when those things happen, because it's such a come down. It's like a plane crashing. It really is. It's a tough one. It's really tough.
I mean, I feel it. I haven't competed since 21. I feel it every time I go to a show to support you, or to, our own show in Ontario, or all these other ones we go to, because there's just so much hype. There's so much energy. You get so motivated, and then like the day after, I just feel like hungover, honestly.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh man, like it's just a wash. And like, I didn't even compete, like my hormones are good, supposedly. So
yeah. Yeah. So I think like when you combine all those things together, like that's where a lot of careers die, is that period of time after a show. And I think that's when, that resentment and frustration towards the sport, and those comments of like, oh, bodybuilding's not healthy. This is what happened to me after the show. I ballooned up 30 pounds in 10 days. My digestive system was fucked, and my hormones were all over the place. And I'm not here to say that bodybuilding's healthy, because the extremes you take it to, just like any endeavor, are not healthy, right? But it can be done in a healthy manner, and you can come out of prep in a healthy manner, right? Like it gets done by hundreds of athletes every single year. But those people that don't position themselves and don't have those conversations, or they talk with their coach, right? Like you've had conversations with clients. I've had conversations with clients about this kind of stuff. It's like, hey, these are the things I'm seeing. I want to just have this conversation open of like, hey, post show's hard. Harder than you think it will be. Like I'm telling you it's hard, and you're like, oh yeah, like it's not gonna be that bad. Like whatever. Like I am telling you right now, when you wake up Sunday morning after your show, and you don't gotta follow the diet if you don't want to, because you can eat whatever you want. And you wake up and there's half the messages that there was a week ago, because the fame is already dying. Because guess what? You had show day yesterday, but it's just another Sunday the next day, and just another Monday. You got to be at work at 8 a.m. on Monday. Life continues. That's tough. and like having those conversations early, and like when the warning signs start to come in, like it's super important, because like I said, I think that period is where the people that, and this is something we talked about early in the podcast, is the duration in which you do this thing is probably a bigger gauge for what you could accomplish. A lot of people don't get to see that side of it, because right here they just, that's it. I'm out.
So if we use this as a cautionary tale, right, for especially the first time competitor, someone who doesn't have the experience, cautionary tale or advice to the coach, right? Like if you're coaching someone, you're doing them a disservice if you don't touch base almost more frequently in the week following. So for those clients, like don't abandon the coach after show day, right? Stick around for at least a month, right? Just to have someone that you can talk to at a moment's notice, to walk you through these things, to listen, to like talk you off the edge, or whatever it ends up being. And then, for those coaches, like if you're not paying attention after the show because you just think, oh, they did it, they made it, like they're good now, they could be in a world of hurt, right? Whether it's like eating disorders or, body image issues, instabilities emotionally, so many different things, right? So I personally try and schedule a call with my clients the Monday after the show. I give them that Sunday to kind of just like live it up, do their thing. Some of them reach out on Sunday, some of them don't, but then like Monday we're talking shop, we're going to see where you are, check in, and like I have a plan in place, but we'll adapt that plan from there, right? So just on that side of things, like there really needs to be some sort of structure in place.
No, 100%. Okay, we touched on expectations, we touched on the fame, we touched on burnout a little bit. What else do you think can really send people askew and run from this game?
I mean, without going too far down this one, like, I mean, there's a lot that's out of your control. There's a lot of things people say that may or may not be true, whether it's politics or, subjectivity in the sport. And they don't like this and that and these rules. And if you don't have an intrinsic motivator making you want to compete and you're only doing it for the extrinsic,
that's good.
There's not much. There really isn't, right? And you start, the further into the sport you get, if you don't have that just love for competing,
yeah, you're like, this is shit.
it gets ugly sometimes, right? The more you know, sometimes it's better to be ignorant to a lot of it and just like go in. Like
Yeah.
I say, like the golden retriever mentality, right? Like everything's great, the world's great, I love everybody, and I'm just gonna compete, right?
Yeah.
Once you start learning and diving in, and it just gets messy, right? So yeah, almost like you got to be intrinsically motivated, because you're not going to make money off of this. You probably won't win that many awards unless you're like a gifted person. And it's just, it gets ugly sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that. But yeah, like I guess that kind of comes back to like expectations a little bit, but like what you hope to get out of bodybuilding. And I think this is something that especially with the younger generation, with wanting to be like social media famous and being like a fitness influencer, like that's hot right now, right? Is being, you've got the discount codes, you've got the supplement sponsor, it's either Young LA or it's Alpha Lead or it's Gymshark. And, bodybuilding, I think for a lot of people feels like it could be a stepping stone to this like celebrity status within the fitness industry. And it's been done for sure. There's people that do it more so on the enhanced side of the sport, but there's natural athletes that have, climbed up the ranks. Like you look at the status like Kendall's achieved, or like Jacob O'Neill, like he's got some sponsorships with like Core and stuff, or Brian DaCosta, like he's a very high profile world champion athlete naturally, and has built a good business and life kind of with that. But I think like a lot of people that go into it saying like, okay, I'm gonna win some shows and I'm just gonna get flooded with sponsorships and opportunities, and they're gonna fly me out to California, and I'm gonna be on the beach, and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and we're gonna be the best natural bodybuilders in the world, and we're gonna document it and this and that. And
don't throw too much shade.
It just doesn't go that way, right? Like for a lot of people, it's not going to happen for a lot of people. And then I think they turn to bodybuilding and look at it as like, this was a waste of time. I spent all this money for these stupid plastic trophies, if any. And, I got 1,500 followers and this and that, and I got to go get a normal job and just be a person.
Here's the thing for those that are newer to the sport, newer to the industry, and don't realize it. Like when you're a sponsored athlete, that term is just used erroneously too much. Nobody except for the top of the top are truly sponsored athletes anymore, right? Like you're a sales rep pretty much, and you get commission.
Yeah.
Right. Even us, we've got a large, relatively large platform. We've been sponsored by 2 different, companies. We don't have a salary. We don't get a stipend, right? Like if we sell a product, we get a percent off of, if we sell above a threshold, right?
Yeah.
And that's how most contracts are across the industry. So if you're looking into it and you've got 3,000 followers and you think you're going to get a code and like make $50,000 a year because you sold 5 units in a month, like the business has to look at it as a business, right? Unless you can sell things, you don't matter. It doesn't matter how many followers you have if you can't convert on that, right? So newsflash, sponsorships don't really mean all that much. For us, it's our way of supporting a company that we like and products that we like. And that's what most people should probably use it as, instead of a way to like try and make money. But yeah, I think it's funny, right? Because people come into it, and we all did probably.
Like
I did when I was younger. You're searching for that one, like somebody's going to hook me up. It just doesn't happen anymore. Especially not in our side of the sport, right? Like the enhanced side, like those guys get contracts, those guys get salaries, but the industry on that side makes so much more money, right? They're making their companies huge amounts of money, so it makes sense, right? There has to be money to make money.
The whole like discount code shtick, I think people get really confused as to what that is, and a lot of it is trying to give some social proof that I mean something, right? Use my code for this, use my code for that. I actually had a client, he won't mind me saying this, but he had a discount code, I think it was for Raw, in his Instagram bio. And he was telling me about this company he was going to work with that was doing like clothing, and they had some like supplements and stuff too. And he was like, yeah, like they're going to give me a code and this and that. And I said, oh, do you like use their products? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, for your code, like I would imagine you use their stuff, no? And he's kind of like pondering. And I said, like, you have that raw code in your Instagram bio, like ever since I've known you. You've never posted about them. You've never posted about any products by them. I said, so that's kind of a lie, dude. And he's like, I could tell the gears are turning in his head, right? And I'm like, that is where people will look at that and be like, well, that is meaningless. There's no value behind that code. And, outside of the people that don't know, that are very oblivious, that are going to go like, wow, like he's got a raw code, like that must mean something, which it doesn't. It's a weird thing that we do, but it's just, yeah. And I think that then can fuel the whole subject of what we're talking about, where it's like, I've got these codes, I'm not making any money, this bodybuilding thing is just not doing it for me, I'm out.
Yep.
Shit.
Yeah. It's a fun world we live in.
Why do we do this?
Because we're like challenging ourselves, right? We are intrinsically motivated. That's the thing. That's the difference why we'll continue to do this even when we're old and saggy and wrinkly. Hopefully, if I can still lift up a barbell,
I don't know, man. You start doing strongman, you might be crippled.
That's a good point. And that might be like a very quick retirement from strongman. First time I like blow my back out again.
All right. I don't think there's anything else I can think of off the top of my head. You got any other reasons that people might? I guess the only other thing is like outside of, if you're starting to see it affect your personal life, with your spouse, with your family, with your kids, like if it's starting to really chip away at the actual important things in life, probably need to like reevaluate, step back a little bit. Because it can be done, right? We do it. People do it. People manage a lot busier than lifestyles than people think and still compete in bodybuilding. But if you're starting to see that like your lack of emotional regularity on prep, or the time that you're putting into bodybuilding, like there's time demands that it will require, but it does need to require every ounce of your day to where you can't live with a partner or for you, right? Spend time with your kids and this and that. Like there's going to be time allocated towards it, but there's also needs to be time allocated to the actual important things in life. And if you're finding it really taking away from those things and affecting your employment and this and that, like, man, I can't work because I'm so depleted. It's like, okay, like, we don't need you getting fired and divorced over a plastic trophy and $1,000 of debt.
Yeah, you got to reevaluate those things for sure, right? And I could see like for someone who just kind of is dipping their toes into it, compete for the first time, see some of these negative side effects and has a family, just say like, nope, not worth it. It was cool to try. Like I'm going to become a marathon runner, which I feel like a lot of people are doing, which also a huge time commitment. That's a lot of running. Not to derail this whole conversation, but yeah, I mean, it's a huge investment financially, time, mentally, emotionally. And if you don't see it as valuable, I could totally understand that.
Even physically, I just thought about this right now, but like we know that some shit can go south when you get those extreme, you get shorter. When you get to those extreme ends of prep, I don't know of situations where there's been permanent damage done. I don't know anybody personally that's had permanent damage done from, getting to those extremes of prep. But I imagine
on the natural side, asterisk on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine those people exist where they've done a show and they've come out of show and stuff's not balanced out. If that is you, then you probably shouldn't do this, to be honest. Like,
Well, I mean, I have female clients that it took months of dedicated, intentional caloric increases and stress reduction to regain like proper hormonal profile and cycle. And I know that's the case with a lot of females that push to a very hard level, right? So us males maybe have it a little bit easier, and the female side of the sport even more detrimental, right? Like if you're someone who wants to be a mother, wants to start a family, and you're a competitor, and it's like it takes me 6-7 months to become normal again, and now we're prepping for 6 months. It's like, all right, I almost have to step away from the sport to start a family, and then you're not just going to jump right back into competing with a young one at home, right? Like there's just a lot of responsibility on that side of the sport. So definitely for the females, right? Like you got to really want to do it, and you got to almost like time the phases of your life right around that, which is a stress that us men don't have to worry about quite as much.
Yeah, for sure. All right, people. Well, you guys enjoyed this episode with James and I talking about what might get you out of the sport. Now, this isn't us shitting on the sport because we love it to death. And like James said, we're probably gonna do this till we're old and wrinkly and gray. But it's an open conversation about areas of the sport that doesn't often get talked about. So if you guys got some insight from this, if you learned anything valuable, obviously you know what to do. Like it, share it, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. If there was clips of this that you liked, screenshot them, share them around, because we're just trying to spread the word, trying to share about the sport that we love, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and at least in somewhat of an entertaining manner. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.